The September morning carried a faint chill, the kind that clung to the skin and hinted at a changing season. Emma Wilson tugged at the straps of her backpack until they sat square on her shoulders. The seams were worn, fraying in places, and the zipper teeth never quite lined up. Beside her, Olivia clutched her notebook so tightly it seemed to steady her trembling hands. They both stood at the base of Westbrook Academy's grand staircase, staring up at a building that looked less like a school and more like a fortress carved from ambition and old money. Sunlight glinted off brass nameplates and tall glass windows, painting the manicured lawns in gold. To Emma and Olivia, it might as well have been another world. Their father, Jack Wilson, stood between them, still smelling faintly of antiseptic and industrial soap from his night shift at the hospital. He wore his best jacket, the one he saved, for church and parent conferences, though the frayed sleeves betrayed its age. The uniform beneath it remained hidden, but he could still feel it, a reminder of how little the world thought of him. He crouched down so his daughters wouldn't have to crane their necks. His eyes were tired, but unwavering, filled with a kind of pride that refused to be dimmed. "Remember what we talked about. Girls, you belong here just as much as anyone else." Emma lifted her chin, the picture of determination in miniature form. Her small hand brushed against the corner of the photograph. Tucked in the front pocket of her notebook, a snapshot of their mother, Catherine, captured in laughter 5 years ago, before sickness had stolen her away. Emma had promised herself that as long as that photo remained near her heart, she would not falter. She was the thinker, the one who took problems apart piece by piece until the answers revealed themselves. Olivia stood close, her wide eyes sweeping over the buildings, stone arches and glossy doors. She didn't speak much, not when nerves pressed in on her chest like they did now. Instead, she turned to her notebook, running her thumb along the edge where countless sketches hid inside. Patterns, spirals, grids, her way of making sense of the world. If Emma saw life in numbers, Olivia saw it in shapes. Together, they made sense of things no one else could. The heavy oak doors groaned open, and Principal Richard Montgomery emerged like a character. From the portraits lining the school's walls, his silver hair was perfectly arranged, his suit tailored to perfection, and his smile measured, warm enough to seem polite, cold enough to keep distance. His eyes swept over the family, pausing briefly at Jack's jacket, then flicking toward the girls' uniforms and shoes. They were clean, but inexpensive, threadbare against the sea of polished leather and embroidered crest that marked the other. "Children inside, the Wilson family," Montgomery announced, voice carrying with practiced authority. "Welcome to Westbrook Academy." He extended a hand to Jack, but his gaze drifted back to the girls, appraising them as though they were items on loan. "Our board insisted on expanding our diversity. These scholarship cases often bring interesting perspectives." The words were delivered smoothly, but the weight of them landed like stones in Emma's chest. Jack's grip tightened in Montgomery's hand, his jaw set. "Thank you for this opportunity, sir." The girls are excited to begin. Emma's cheeks burned, but Olivia's fingers found hers in a silent squeeze, their private code for stay steady. They had learned long ago that the world didn't always welcome them, but together they were stronger than the sting of careless words. Montgomery gestured toward the towering hall behind him, already turning without waiting for a response. "Let me show you to your classroom. Dr. Hayes will be very particular about standards." As they followed, the hall swallowed them whole. The walls gleamed with portraits of alumni, children who had gone on to Ivy League schools, their eyes painted with quiet confidence. The other students glanced at them, conversations dipping into whispers before resuming with laughter that sounded rehearsed. Designer backpacks swung from polished shoulders, tablets and devices gleamed in their hands. Emma's fingers brushed the zipper of her own bag, but she refused to look down. When they reached the classroom door, Montgomery stopped. His voice was clipped, almost dismissive. "This is where we part ways, Mr. Wilson. The girls will find their way just fine, won't you, girls?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. Jack crouched again, kissed each daughter's forehead, and whispered words that carried the weight of their entire journey. "I'll be here at 3:30 sharp. Make your mother proud. Remember, you belong here just as much as anyone else." Emma inhaled deeply, her small chest rising with quiet defiance. Olivia tucked her notebook closer, her eyes fierce despite their tremble. As the heavy door creaked open, spilling light across rows of perfect posture and sharpened pencils, the twins stepped forward, side by side. The battle had already begun. The classroom was so quiet that Emma could hear the ticking of the clock on the back wall. Every head turned as she and Olivia crossed the polished floor, their shoes clicking like intruders in a cathedral of wealth. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish and chalk dust, the air heavy with expectation. At the front stood Dr. Eleanor Hayes, her back perfectly straight, her blue eyes sharp as polished glass. She had been writing equations on the board when they entered, and now she set down the chalk slowly. As though their arrival had disrupted more than just her lesson, "Class," Dr. Hayes announced, her voice cool, precise. "We have the new students joining us today, the Wilson twins." She let the words hang, and then with the faintest curl of her lip added, "They're here on special arrangement." The emphasis wasn't missed. Several students shifted in their seats, eyes darting between Emma's frayed backpack and Olivia's scuffed shoes. The message was clear: these girls weren't here because they belonged, but because someone powerful had insisted. Emma's stomach tightened, but she remembered her father's words outside the door. "You belong here just as much as anyone else." She lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and walked to the back row where the empty desks waited. Olivia followed, clutching her notebook like a lifeline. She slid into her chair and immediately flipped open a page, pencil in hand, sketching small shapes in the margin to calm her nerves. Dr. Hayes returned to the board, resuming her lesson. As though nothing had changed, her chalk moved with mechanical precision, outlining an intricate fraction problem across the slate. Numbers and symbols filled the board like soldiers in formation. She turned suddenly, her gaze sweeping the room, then landing squarely on Emma, "Miss Emma Wilson," she said, her tone sharp as a snapped twig. "Since you're new to our standards, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate your ability. Solve this." The class fell silent. Emma felt the weight of 22 stares pressing down on her, the air thick with anticipation. The problem glared back at her, complex fractions woven together in a way meant to confuse. For a moment, her breath caught, then Olivia shifted in her seat, giving her a tiny nod, the silent promise that whatever happened, she wasn't alone. Emma stood, the scrape of her chair against the floor echoing louder than thunder in her ears. She walked to the front slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. Dr. Hayes handed her the chalk with a smirk that almost dared her to fail. Emma took the chalk. Its cool weight familiar. She stared at the problem, remembering the nights she'd watched her mother work equations at their kitchen table. Catherine's voice echoing in memory. "Math is like music, sweetheart. Once you hear the rhythm, the melody will follow." She began with the parentheses. Finding the common denominator, her hand moved steadily, numbers unfolding like notes in a melody only she could hear. She converted, simplified, multiplied. Her small voice broke the silence, explaining each step aloud, not just solving, but teaching. "Division by a fraction," she said firmly, "is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. And we always solve the parentheses first, just like in regular arithmetic." A ripple of recognition moved through the class. Tommy Martinez, who'd struggled with fractions all year, suddenly whispered, "Oh, that makes sense now." Dr. Hayes's smile faltered. She leaned forward slightly, scanning the board, her eyes narrowing as Emma finished with a neat, simplified answer. It was correct, perfect, even. Worse, Emma's explanation had made it clear to every struggling student in the room. "Adequate," Dr. Hayes said finally, her voice cold, though her fingers tapped the desk in irritation. "Though I suspect you've been rehearsed." Emma flushed, but she kept her voice steady. "No, ma'am. I've never seen this exact problem, but my mom always said if you understand the rules, you can solve any combination." The mention of her mother flickered something in her chest. Grief, pride, fire. She placed the chalk back carefully and returned to her seat. Olivia's eyes were glowing now, her small smile carrying enough pride for both of them. The rest of the class continued, but the energy had shifted. Students were whispering, not in ridicule, but curiosity. Emma could hear fragments. "She explained it better than Dr. Hayes. Do you think she'd help me after class?" Dr. Hayes saw it too, and her jaw tightened. For the first time in years, she felt the balance of her classroom slipping, the careful hierarchy she'd built, the flawless system where she reigned supreme and her pupils bent under her authority was shifting. These girls, with their thrift store uniforms and quiet defiance, had just cracked her control. As the bell rang and students filed out, Dr. Hayes remained at her desk, her expression unreadable. But inside, her mind was already plotting. One problem proves nothing, she thought. They cannot possibly sustain this. Tomorrow, I'll find the cracks. Tomorrow, they'll show their limits. Emma and Olivia left the classroom hand in hand, the whispers of their classmates trailing behind them for the first time. They weren't just the poor twins on scholarship. They were something else, something no one had expected, and though they didn't know it yet, they had just stepped into the center of a silent war that would test not only their minds, but their very place in this world. The next morning, the sun was bright and sharp against the tall windows of Westbrook Academy. But inside Dr. Hayes' classroom, the air felt colder than usual. Emma and Olivia sat side by side at their desks in the back row, their notebooks open, pencils poised, waiting for the lesson to begin. Their classmates whispered quietly, eyes darting toward them more often than toward the board. Yesterday had changed something. They weren't invisible anymore. Emma had solved the impossible problem. Olivia's calm sketches in the margins had caught Sarah Chen's attention. The twins weren't just scholarship cases anymore. They were a mystery everyone wanted to watch unfold. Dr. Hayes walked in precisely on time, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She carried a folder tucked under her arm, lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes swept across the room, pausing only briefly on the twins before moving on. "Good morning, class," she said coolly. "Today we will continue with patterns and area where true mathematical understanding is revealed. Memorization, after all, can only take a person so far." Her words landed like stones tossed into a pond, rippling outward until every eye turned to Emma and Olivia. Emma kept her chin high, though she felt the sting of the jab. Olivia shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tracing invisible spirals on the surface of her desk. Dr. Hayes turned to the board and, with a flourish, began writing a sequence of numbers: 2, 6, 18, 54, 162. For A for dot, she capped the chalk with a snap and turned to face them. "Who can tell me the pattern?" Sarah Chen's hand shot up. "Each number is multiplied by 3. "Excellent," Dr. Hayes said smoothly. "Simple geometric progression. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 3 is 18, and so on." Emma frowned. She copied the numbers quickly into her notebook, whispering to herself as she checked the math. 162 times 3 should equal 486, not 484. Her pencil dug into the page as she double-checked, her heart beginning to beat faster. Beside her, Olivia had already sketched a quick multiplication tree, her pencil circling the error. Emma raised her hand slowly, remembering her father's advice. "Sometimes it's not what you say, sweetheart, but how you say it that matters." "Yes, Miss Wilson." Dr. Hayes' voice was like a blade. Emma swallowed. "I'm sorry, Dr. Hayes. But if each number is multiplied by 3, then shouldn't the 6th term be 486 instead of 484? The room froze. Every head turned toward the board, then back at Dr. Hayes. A hush fell so heavy that even the ticking of the wall clock sounded like thunder. Dr. Hayes blinked, her expression betraying nothing. Inside, her mind raced. She had written the wrong number, a slip of chalk, a moment's inattention, but in front of her entire class, it was a mistake. She clenched her hands behind her back, fighting to keep her composure. Admitting an error to a 7-year-old would unravel her carefully built authority. "Excellent observation, Miss Wilson," she said finally, her tone smooth once again. She strode to the board, erased the 484, and replaced it with 486. "I was, of course, testing your attention to detail. Too many students accept information blindly, without checking for themselves. Miss Wilson has demonstrated the kind of mathematical skepticism that separates true learners from imitators." The explanation slid easily from her tongue, but her jaw was tight as stone. Emma nodded politely, though she knew exactly what had happened. Olivia gave her sister the smallest of smiles, proud of her courage. Dr. Hayes turned back to the class. "Now that we've reviewed a simple sequence, let's see who can handle something more complex." Her eyes lingered on Olivia this time. "Miss Olivia Wilson, come to the board." Olivia's heart thudded against her ribs. She closed her notebook carefully, clutching her pencil like it was a lifeline, and walked to the front. Dr. Hayes wrote, a new sequence, longer, twisted, deliberately designed to confuse. Numbers looped into one another like vines tangled in shadow. Olivia studied the problem, her wide eyes narrowing as she sketched in the margin of the board. She drew circles, arrows, and small grids, her pencil moving quickly as she turned the abstract sequence into a picture. A faint murmur rippled through the class as they watched. Unlike Emma's methodical logic, Olivia was painting with numbers. Seeing shapes where others saw only digits dot slowly, the solution took form. She explained quietly, almost shyly, but her words carried clarity. The sequence has the patterns woven together. She said, pointing to her diagram, one moves up by squares, the other moves up by doubles. If you separate them, you can see how they fit together like pieces of a puzzle. When she finished, the room was silent again, but this time, not from doubt, from awe. Dr. Hayes' face didn't change, but inside, something unsettled stirred. These children weren't just clever, they were thinking in ways she hadn't. Anticipated ways her elite students had never dared. Logical precision from one, visual creativity from the other, and together, they were reshaping the room very well. Dr. Hayes said stiffly, "Return to your seat." As Olivia walked back, Emma gave her hand a quick squeeze. The girls sat straighter, their chests lighter. For the first time, their classmates didn't look at them with pity or suspicion, but with curiosity. Even RESPECT. Dr. Hayes turned back to the board, but her thoughts were already racing ahead. One mistake could be dismissed. One clever solution could be explained away. But this was dangerous. If these twins continued to shine, they could disrupt everything she had built at Westbrook. Her lips thinned as she began writing another problem, more complex than the last. Tomorrow, she decided, I'll set them a challenge no amount of childish luck can solve. Emma and Olivia exchanged another glance, sensing the storm gathering. The real battle had only just begun. The October air outside Westbrook Academy had grown sharp, but inside Dr. Hayes' classroom, the heat of a different storm was building. By now, the weeks had passed since the Wilson twins arrived, and every morning felt like stepping into an arena. The students had begun to notice. Some whispered in admiration, others in resentment, but all of them watched the sisters closely. Emma and Olivia had stopped being background characters. They were now the secret heartbeat of the class. Dr. Hayes knew it too, and it ate at her every night. 23 years of teaching, a lifetime spent curating excellence, and suddenly, the poor girls in department store uniforms were shaking the foundation she had built. Her pride was a fortress, and pride, when wounded, does not retreat. It strikes harder. This particular morning she walked into class carrying a manila folder, her heels sharper, her smile tighter than usual. The folder was thin, but to Emma and Olivia, it radiated threat. "Class," she said, sitting in on her desk with deliberate weight. "Before we begin today's lesson, I've prepared a small assessment, a test of adaptability." The word test silenced the room. Students shifted uneasily, some exchanging glances. But her eyes fell not on them, but on Emma and Olivia. "Miss Emma Wilson," she said sweetly, almost as sweetly, "come forward." Emma's stomach clenched, but she rose without hesitation. She had faced worse before: whispering hallways, pitying stares, nights of grief when she missed her mother most. She wouldn't shrink now. She walked to the front, her small shoes clicking against the tile. Dr. Hayes slid a sheet of paper onto the desk and turned it face up. It wasn't a simple problem this time. It was a word problem twisted into algebra. The kind of riddle meant for students 3 or 4 years older. A farmer has chickens and cows. Emma read softly, scanning the lines. Together they have 30 heads and 80 for legs. How many chickens and how many cows does the farmer have? The class tittered nervously. Most of them hadn't seen problems like this. Emma's heart pounded, but her mind began to hum. That rhythm her mother had once described. She whispered to herself, "Chickens have 2 legs, cows have 4. If all 30 were chickens, that would be 60 legs. But we need 84. That's 20 for more. Each cow adds to extra legs." Her pencil scratched rapidly. "So there must be 12 cows and 18 chickens." She checked her work carefully once, then twice, and then spoke clearly enough for the class to hear. 18 chickens, 12 cows. Dr. Hayes scanned the paper. Correct. She felt irritation prick her skin like heat rash. "Well done," she said flatly. "Now Miss Olivia Wilson." Olivia startled but stood, hugging her notebook to her chest. She moved to the front with quiet steps. This time, Dr. Hayes handed her a geometric puzzle, a rectangle divided into smaller shapes. The problem asking for the area of a hidden section. It was a trap for the visual thinker, designed to overwhelm with overlapping lines. Olivia's wide eyes darted across the page. Then she bent quickly over it, sketching in the margins. Her pencil moved fast, drawing lines, turning rectangles into pieces of a puzzle. She whispered, "If I cut it here, It becomes the smaller rectangles. Add their areas together. The class leaned forward as she drew a clean diagram on the board, explaining in soft but certain words. Slowly, the chaos of the puzzle melted into clarity. She wrote the answer, circled it, then turned back, cheeks pink but eyes steady. Silence, then astonished murmurs from the hallway. Someone had been watching. Dr. Matthew Collins, the young science teacher, had paused on his way to the lab. His eyes widened as he took in the sight to 7-year-old girls solving problems most of his middle schoolers couldn't manage. He stepped inside, curiosity overpowering discretion. Dr. Hayes stiffened at the intrusion. Dr. Collins, she said curtly, may I help you? No, he said slowly, still watching Olivia. I just didn't want to interrupt, but what I'm seeing is remarkable. He turned to the class. Do you all realize how advanced this is? The students exchanged nods and whispers. Dr. Hayes' jaw tightened. That will be all, Dr. Collins, she said icily, but Dr. Collins didn't leave. He stood at the back, arms crossed, his gaze thoughtful. He saw at the balance in the twins' approaches, Emma's logic, Olivia's visualization, two minds, solving the same storm from different sides. By the time the bell rang, a line had been drawn though no one had spoken it aloud. Some teachers saw disruption, others saw a miracle. At lunch, Dr. Hayes sat with Principal Montgomery in the faculty lounge, her voice low, her tone urgent. They're destabilizing the classroom, she hissed. Students are beginning to rely on their explanations instead of my instruction. Montgomery sipped his coffee, expression cool. We expected complications when the board forced these scholarships. That's the price of politics. Still, if their presence threatens our standards, we must act decisively. Across the room, Dr. Collins leaned toward the art teacher, Carmen Garcia. I just watched Olivia turn a geometry problem into an art lesson, he whispered, excitement in his voice. She sees math like colors, like shapes on a canvas. And Emma, she breaks problems down like a scientist testing hypotheses. Together, they're not disrupting education, they're redefining it. Ms. Garcia's eyes widened. I mean, Collins said, lowering his voice, we're watching genius in its rawest form. That evening, as Emma and Olivia sat at their small kitchen table with their father, the battle lines were already forming though the girls didn't know it yet. One side saw them as trouble, as a threat to be managed. The other saw them as a gift, something rare, something the world might never see again. And somewhere in the quiet between those two forces, Dr. Hayes' resolve hardened into something sharp. She would not let these children unravel her authority. If the classroom couldn't expose their limits, then she would find a stage much larger. The Olympiad was coming, and she was already making plans. The first frosts of November sparkled on Westbrook Academy's lawns like broken glass. Sharp and cold in the morning sun, Emma and Olivia walked in silence beside their father, the breath of all three rising in pale clouds. Jack Wilson squeezed their hands before they entered the building, his voice steady though his body was weary from the long night shift at the hospital. Remember, girls, you don't have to prove yourselves to anyone. Just do your best. That's more than enough. But his eyes betrayed the truth. He knew they were walking into something bigger than just another school day. Inside, a buzz filled the corridors. The older students whispered about an announcement that would shake the school. Even the teachers seemed tense when the morning bell rang and Dr. Hayes strode into her classroom. Her heels clicked like a judge entering a courtroom. In her hand she carried not her usual folder, but a heavy envelope embossed with a crest. She placed it on her desk as though it were a verdict. Class, she began, her voice ringing with false cheer. I have news that should excite all of you. She lifted the envelope and drew out a sheet of paper, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of someone unveiling a trap. Westbrook Academy has been invited to participate in the Regional Elementary Mathematics Olympiad. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Even the wealthiest children, the ones who boasted of private tutors and summer math camps, sat up straighter. The Olympiad was the holy grail of competitive mathematics, the place where reputations were forged and scholarships were won. It was not a playground for beginners. It was a battlefield for prodigies. Dr. Hayes let the anticipation hang before she continued. This is no ordinary contest. It spans 6 hours, with 5 rounds of elimination. Only the most advanced students survive to the finals. Westbrook has a proud history of representation, and this year we intend to continue that tradition. Her eyes flicked toward the back row where Emma and Olivia sat. Our school may submit 3 competitors. I have already chosen one. Trent Phillips straightened in his chair. His designer blazer crisp, his smirk smug. His mother was on the school board. He had been trained for this since preschool. Everyone expected his name, and Hayes gave it proudly. Trent Phillips. Applause broke politely. Trent leaned back, tossing Emma a superior glance as if daring her to challenge his throne. And for the other 2. Dr. Hayes paused, savoring the moment. Emma and Olivia Wilson. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, laughter. Some students looked impressed, but many exchanged mocking grins. The scholarship kids. One voice hissed, "They'll embarrass." U.S. Emma's spine stiffened, but Olivia's hand trembled slightly as she gripped her sister's. The entire class seemed to press down on them like a weight. Dr. Hayes' smile was sweet, but her eyes cold. Yes, the Wilson twins, since they've demonstrated enthusiasm for mathematics, I think it will be educational for them to experience true competition, of course. The Olympiad features students from Princeton Preparatory, Bradford Academy, and the Institute of Mathematical Excellence, children who've been coached for years. Her gaze sharpened. 7-year-olds rarely survive the first round. The challenge was unmistakable. Emma heard her father's voice echo in her mind. "You belong here just as much as anyone else." She lifted her chin. "We'd be honored to represent Westbrook, Dr. Hayes," she said firmly. Olivia, though pale, nodded beside her. "Excellent," Hayes replied, hiding her satisfaction. She already imagined the scene. The twins eliminated in the early rounds, their failures proving her point that raw talent could not replace proper preparation. Trent would shine, and her authority would be vindicated, but unseen by her. A different storm was brewing. That afternoon, Dr. Collins intercepted Jack Wilson as he waited for his daughters outside. He spoke quickly, his tone low. "Mr. Wilson, I know Dr. Hayes nominated them as a kind of test, but your girls, they're extraordinary. I've seen it. I don't want them walking into the Olympiad blind." Jack frowned, unsure. "I can't afford tutors or programs. They'll be on their own." Collins slipped a manila envelope into Jack's hands. "Old Olympiad problems. Past tests. With explanations. Use them, but keep this between us." Jack's rough fingers tightened around the folder. "Why are you helping?" Collins' eyes softened. "Because talent like theirs doesn't come along often. And because your wife," he hesitated. "Catherine, I remember her from graduate seminars. She saw math differently, beautifully. I think your girls inherited that." Jack's throat tightened. He nodded silently, clutching the folder as though it were gold. That night, the Wilson apartment transformed into a war room. The dining table disappeared beneath piles of scratch paper, borrowed textbooks, and the precious Olympiad problems. Emma attacked them with her usual methodical logic. Olivia drew diagrams, turned probabilities into colored marble sketches, transformed geometry into art. But some nights the problems left them in tears. Olivia once shoved her notebook away, whispering, "We'll never catch up. These kids have had years. We only have weeks." Jack placed a dusty cardboard box on the table. "Then maybe it's time you see this." Inside were their mother's notebooks, filled with half-solved equations, furious scribbles, and margin notes that read, "Try again tomorrow," or "Patience is the real formula." The girls read in awe. Their mother had struggled to, fought through problems that seemed impossible, but always returned to them with stubborn love. Her handwriting seemed to whisper encouragement from beyond. Fueled by Catherine's legacy, the twins pushed harder. They built systems, Emma tackled logic, Olivia visualized patterns. Then they combined their answers until clarity emerged. Slowly, impossibilities turned into breakthroughs. But across town, in a glass-walled study lined with awards, Trent Phillips was drilling problems with a private coach flown in from Mitt. His preparation was relentless, his confidence absolute. Dr. Hayes visited often, praising his progress, feeding his ego. "This Olympiad is yours to win," she told him. "The Wilson twins, they'll crumble. Their failure will only highlight your brilliance." What she didn't understand was that brilliance born of privilege, and drills could never match brilliance. Born of hunger, grief, and love. As the competition date drew near, whispers spread through Westbrook's corridors. Some students laughed at the idea of the poor twins representing them. Others, secretly inspired, hoped the girls would prove everyone wrong. Even teachers were divided. The school itself felt like a pressure cooker, every gaze fixed on the unlikely. pair who dared to walk into the lion's den. The stage was set. Westbrook's pride, Dr. Hayes' reputation, Trent's entitlement. The board's prejudice, all of it would collide in a single day. And for Emma and Olivia Wilson, that day was no longer just about survival. It was about honoring their mother's memory, their father's sacrifice, and proving that brilliance needs no permission to shine. The Olympiad was coming, and with it, the storm that would shake every assumption at Westbrook Academy to its core. The morning of the Olympiad dawned with a thin sheet of frost clinging to the city's rooftops. Jack Wilson's old Honda Civic coughed its way through traffic, the heater wheezing against the cold. In the back seat, Emma and Olivia sat in silence, their pressed uniforms wrinkling against the leather seats. That smelled faintly of hospital disinfectant from their father's overnight shifts. Between them, their notebooks lay open, not with last-minute calculations, but with their mother's handwriting copied carefully in the margins. Patience is the real formula. Try again tomorrow. The beauty is hidden in the pattern. Bradford Academy loomed ahead on a hilltop, its Gothic spires cutting into the pale November sky. The school's stone facade looked more like a cathedral than a place for children. Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling impossibly small beneath its shadow. "Remember," he said softly, his voice cracking with pride and worry, "you belong here just as much as anyone else." Inside the vast auditorium, the air buzzed with nervous energy. 200 students filled the rows, children in designer suits and dresses, clutching the latest calculators, flanked by parents who whispered about Ivy League pipelines. Emma and Olivia sat at a small wooden desk near the aisle, their second-hand backpacks tucked neatly beneath their chairs. The stares they drew were immediate, sharp, and dismissive. One boy in a blazer embroidered with a Princeton prep crest smirked, whispering loud enough for them to hear, "Cute, maybe they're here to sharpen our pencils." Olivia's cheeks flushed, but Emma slid her hand across the desk and squeezed her sister's fingers 3 times. Their silent signal. "We're stronger together." At the front of the room, Dr. Margaret Steinberg, head judge and professor at MIT, tapped the microphone. "Welcome to the Regional Elementary Mathematics Olympiad," she announced, her voice firm and commanding. "Today, we test not just knowledge, but creativity, perseverance, and clarity of thought. 5 rounds, elimination after each, by days. And only 5 will remain." The first booklets were handed out. The room filled with the thunder of 200 papers being flipped open. Emma took a breath, looked at Olivia, and began. The first round was familiar terrain word problems. Logic puzzles, sequences. The kind they had drilled late at night under the yellow glow of their apartment lamp. Emma attacked them with clean, methodical reasoning. Olivia sketched diagrams, turned fractions into shapes, visualized probability with colored dots. 45 minutes later, their pencils dropped just as the proctor called time. When the list of names advancing appeared on the overhead projector, Emma felt her pulse stutter. 80 names glowed. Hers and Olivia's were among them. Jack, sitting in the parent gallery, let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Round 2 was harder. The problems twisted into knots of algebra and geometry. Olivia's visual maps caught patterns Emma hadn't yet seen, and Emma's logical breakdowns gave structure to Olivia's drawings. When they advanced again, the whispers began. The scholarship twins, again, impossible. They must be guessing. By lunch, only 24 competitors remained. The Wilson twins sat at a corner table with their father, eating sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. Around them, silver trays of catered meals glinted under the lights. Parents in pearls and tailored suits whispered about their children's performance. Jack tried to stay invisible, but when he saw his daughters laughing softly, sharing Olivia's napkin sketches, his chest swelled with a pride no wealth could purchase. Across the hall, Dr. Hayes sat with Trent Phillips and his mother. Trent's jaw was tight, his confidence wavering. "They're not supposed to be here," he muttered, eyes darting toward the twins. Dr. Hayes leaned close, her voice like ice. "Focus, Trent. You're prepared. They're only children playing at brilliance." But inside, Honey's nodded at her. Each round the twins survived was a crack in her certainty. Round 3 whittled the field to 12. Then came the semifinal. The problems transformed into riddles so complex they bordered on the absurd. 6 hours in, exhaustion draped the competitors like heavy cloaks. Children rubbed their temples, erased furiously, whispered to themselves. Olivia fought tears at one point, staring at a probability problem that tangled into chaos. Emma leaned toward her and whispered, barely audible, "Remember Mom's note, step back. Don't force it. Olivia closed her eyes, sketched a simple diagram of marbles in a bag, and suddenly it clicked. She circled the answer just as time was called. When the names of the final 5 were announced, Emma and Olivia's appeared alongside Trent Phillips, Jennifer Morrison from Princeton Prep, and David Chen from Bradford Academy. Gasps rippled through the auditorium. To 7-year-olds, against children 3 and 4 years older, against the very best of the elite. The stage was cleared. 5 desks were rolled forward, illuminated under a bright spotlight. The finalists filed in, their faces pale, their hands trembling. Emma and Olivia looked impossibly small against the vastness of the hall, but they sat straight, their notebooks ready. Side by side, Dr. Steinberg stepped forward with a single sheet of paper. Your final challenge, she announced, is a pattern recognition problem designed to test not only your computational skill, but your ability to see mathematics in its deepest form. You have 90 minutes. She wrote the sequence on a massive board visible to all. 1, 4, 9, 16, 7, 12, 19, 28, 15, 24, 35, 48. Determine the governing pattern, she said, and provide the next for terms with proof. The silence was profound. Judges leaned forward. Parents held their breath. Pencils began to scratch furiously. Trent Phillips attacked with the rigid drills drilled into him since childhood. Trying arithmetic, geometric, polynomial fits, his paper filled with dead ends. Jennifer Morrison applied advanced algebraic techniques her tutor had taught her, only to stall. David Chen wrote statistical models, erasing again and again. But Emma and Olivia looked at the sequence and saw not numbers but music, shapes, spirals. A conversation, Emma whispered. It alternates. Odd positions are one rule, even positions. Another, Olivia's pencil flew, sketching a spiral that mapped the numbers visually. Squares modified by their position. See, it bends. The realization hit them both at once. To interwoven sequences, tied together by geometric symmetry, a design hidden in plain sight. They worked feverishly, Emma proving it step by step. Olivia drawing the pattern so anyone could see. With 20 minutes left, they set their pencils down. Their answer was complete. Not only the next for numbers 39, 52, 63, 80, but a dual explanation. Analytical and visual, rigorous and beautiful. The judges gathered around their papers, whispering with excitement. I've never seen a solution presented like this. Dr. Martinez of Stanford said, they've bridged intuition and proof. Dr. Steinberg nodded slowly, her eyes shining. Time was called. Papers collected. Silence pressed down on the room. And then Dr. Steinberg returned to the podium, her voice carrying through the vast hall. This year's champions, with a perfect score and an unprecedented solution, are Emma and Olivia Wilson of Westbrook Academy. The auditorium erupted. Applause thundered. Some parents rising to their feet. Jack Wilson buried his face in his hands, tears streaming freely. The twins looked at one another, stunned, then rose slowly to accept the crystal trophy that sparkled in the light, like something from a dream. And as they walked forward, hand in hand, something shifted in the world. Around them, they weren't just poor girls in second-hand uniforms anymore. They were mathematicians. They were champions. They were a story that could not be ignored. But the greatest shock was still to come. One judge leaned close to the microphone, her voice trembling with recognition. I knew your mother, Dr. Winters whispered. Catherine Wilson was brilliant, and today, her brilliance lives again. The hall fell silent at those words, as though time itself had paused. And in that silence, the legacy of Catherine Wilson rose to life in her daughters. Two little girls who had just shaken the foundations of privilege with nothing but pencils, paper, and courage. The Monday after the Olympiad, Westbrook Academy felt different. The air, usually heavy with the smugness of inherited wealth, now carried a current of whispers. Students clustered in hallways, passing notes, murmuring fragments of disbelief. Did you hear? The Wilson twins won? No way. Against Princeton Prep and Bradford? Even the older students, the ones who usually ignored the younger years, craned their necks when Emma and Olivia walked past in their pressed but modest uniforms. The twins moved quietly, heads lowered, but something had shifted in their posture. Emma walked straighter, her hand never straying far from the photo of their mother in her notebook. Olivia's wide eyes still searched the walls and ceilings for patterns, but there was no tremble in her grip anymore. They weren't invisible children clinging to a scholarship now. They were champions whose names had been printed in the regional paper, and whose photographs holding the crystal trophy gleamed in the school newsletter. Principal Montgomery summoned them to the main hall that morning. Students filled the auditorium seats, faculty lined the walls, and reporters from local education journals had set up cameras near the back. Montgomery cleared his throat, his silver hair gleaming beneath the chandeliers. "It is my great pleasure," he announced, his smile polished but tight, "to recognize Emma and Olivia Wilson, who have brought honor to Westbrook Academy by securing first place at the Regional Elementary Mathematics Olympiad." Thunderous applause filled the hall, but Emma and Olivia noticed the way Montgomery's eyes never softened. His voice was full of pride for the school, not for them. It was a performance, carefully curated. He gestured stiffly toward them, and the twins rose to the stage with quiet dignity, the crystal trophy glinting in Emma's hands. The crowd erupted again, this time with a tone of respect that felt genuine. In the back row, Jack Wilson sat in his best jacket, his custodial uniform hidden beneath it. His tired eyes glistened with tears as he watched his daughters stand where no one had believed they belonged. But the applause could not drown out the storm building on the other side of the stage. Dr. Hayes stood stiffly near the faculty line, her face carefully composed. The walls of her certainty had crumbled in one shattering weekend. She had watched her prized student, Trent Phillips, falter, his methodical drills collapsing under the weight of a problem that required imagination. She had watched Emma and Olivia pour, untrained, unpolished, step forward and solve with elegance that had stunned even university professors. At worst of all, she had seen the respect of her colleagues shifting away from her authority toward those two little girls. That night, alone in her study, Dr. Hayes pulled out Catherine Wilson's old thesis from the university archives. She remembered Catherine, faintly bright eyes, and unyielding curiosity, a young mathematician who spoke of numbers like they were poetry. Catherine's margins were filled not with rigid equations, but with questions. What if the beauty of math is not in solving but in seeing? As Hayes read, something broke inside her, an uncomfortable realization that she had spent decades mistaking conformity for excellence. The next day, after her last class, she called Emma and Olivia to stay behind. The twins approached cautiously, expecting another trap, but when they looked at their teacher, they saw something new: vulnerability. "I owe you both an apology," Dr. Hayes began, her voice quieter than they'd ever heard it. "For weeks, I tested you not to teach you, but to break you. I told myself it was for your own good. The truth is, I was protecting my pride, not your education." She paused, her hands trembling slightly on the desk. "I read your mother's research last night. She understood something I never did, that mathematical brilliance isn't one shape. It's 1,000 shapes. You've shown me that, and I thank you." Emma and Olivia stood frozen, unsure how to respond. But Olivia, the gentler of the two, whispered, "Our mom always said math is like finding hidden beauty. Maybe you see it now." Double quotes. Dr. Hayes' throat tightened. For the first time in her 23-year career, she felt tears sting her eyes. In the weeks that followed, change rippled through Westbrook Academy. Dr. Hayes began restructuring her lessons. Students no longer sat silently copying her every word. They worked in groups, explained problems to one another, used drawings, games, and stories. Olivia's visual methods were incorporated into geometry lessons. Emma's logical breakdowns became models for structured problem solving. Even students who had struggled for years began to understand. But the most profound change came when Principal Montgomery, under pressure from the board and glowing media attention, announced the creation of the Catherine Wilson Mathematics Scholarship. It was to be awarded annually to students of extraordinary potential, regardless of background or resources. The day of the dedication, the Academy's main hall was draped in banners. A bronze plaque was unveiled, the Catherine Morrison Wilson Memorial Mathematics Scholarship, established to nurture brilliance in all its forms, to honor those who see patterns where others see chaos, and to ensure that every child with a gift finds a place to grow. Jack read the inscription aloud, his voice thick with emotion, his rough hands resting gently on his daughter's shoulders. "Your mother would be proud," he whispered. Dr. Winters from the university gave a speech, recalling Catherine's research. She believed mathematics was the language of the universe, and her daughters have proven that language speaks through many voices, not just the privileged, not just the prepared, but anyone brave enough to look deeper. As families mingled afterward, Emma and Olivia noticed three new children standing nervously near the refreshment table too, in clothes as worn as their own had once been, clutching letters of acceptance for the scholarship. One girl looked no older than 7, holding a sketchbook full of shapes. The twins exchanged a glance and smiled. Doors were opening now, doors their mother would have wanted open later. As Jack drove them home under the glow of streetlights, Emma turned to her sister. "You know what Mom would say." Olivia smiled faintly, her eyes shining. "That math is just another way of seeing the beauty that's always been there." The city blurred past, their father humming softly under his breath, the bronze plaque still gleaming in their memories. They were still poor, still ordinary in the world's eyes, but they had reshaped Westbrook Academy, carried their mother's legacy into light, and proved to everyone that brilliance doesn't wear a uniform. It burns from within. And for Emma and Olivia Wilson, that was only the beginning.